The vast majority of apex predators want no part of us. Thousands of years of accumulated experience have taught them that people are dangerous, that people are erratic, and that we are not worth whatever might be gained from the attempt. A small number of predators never received that lesson. These are animals that will deliberately track, follow, and hunt a human being as food. For some, it comes down to desperation. Once, whatever they normally eat has vanished. For others, it happens simply because we occupy the same ground they do, and to them we register as one more meal. Today we're examining 6 apex predators with a documented history of hunting people. Our first takes us into forest country, both in Africa and across the Indian subcontinent. No big cat adapts like the leopard, which occupies a wider spread of habitat than any large feline on Earth. Central African rainforest, Himalayan foothills in Nepal, and nearly everything in between. Central Asian scrub, African savanna, farmland on the edge of a city. Wherever they land, they find some way to prosper. They live alone, they move at night, and their stealth is remarkable. Those very qualities are what turn them into the most dangerous of the big cats to people in certain regions. Lions and tigers take the headlines whenever one of them kills somebody, and yet it is the leopard that has quietly assembled one of the largest death tolls belonging to any land predator anywhere, and it has produced several of the most prolific individual man-eaters ever documented. The thing that really elevates the danger is how relaxed they are around human settlement. Lions, as a rule, steer clear of villages, and tigers keep to thick forest, but a leopard will stroll directly into a town or a city once darkness falls. Across India, attacks inside urban and semi-urban settings have climbed in recent years as development eats further into leopard range. There are documented cases of leopards slipping in through open windows and unlatched doorways to attack people while they were asleep in their own homes. One particularly alarming episode came in 2016 when a leopard found its way inside a school building in Bangalore, setting off chaos as staff pursued it through corridors and classrooms until it could be tranquilized. Operating that close to people while going completely undetected is exactly what makes them such effective man-eaters and such frightening ones. History's most notorious man-eating leopard was the leopard of Panar, credited with more than 400 deaths in the Panar district of northern India during the early 1900s. That figure ranks the animal second among individual man-eaters on record, surpassed only by one tiger we'll come to shortly. Jim Corbett, the legendary hunter who spent much of his life hunting down man-eating big cats throughout India, rated a man-eating leopard considerably harder and more hazardous to hunt than any man-eating tiger. His reasoning came down to size and visibility. A leopard is smaller, tougher to pick out, hunts almost entirely after dark, and uses cover with genuine mastery to close the distance on whatever it's after. Corbett shot a number of man-eating leopards over his career, and he observed that nearly every one of them had turned to hunting people after an injury left it incapable of taking its usual prey. A shattered jaw, a porcupine quill buried deep in a paw, an old bullet wound, any of these and the animal would shift toward whatever food source demanded the least effort from it. In the crowded villages of rural India, that meant people. Even now, leopard attacks continue right across India, and they kill dozens of people every single year. The leopard claims 6th place. And for our next entry, we head into the frozen north, to the single bear species that genuinely regards a human being as prey. Nothing on land grows into a bigger predator than the polar bear. Large males can top 700 kilos and rise to almost 3 meters on their hind legs, and everything about them suits Arctic life, from heavy blubber and dense fur to enormous paws that function as snowshoes across the ice. Within that frozen environment, nothing whatsoever sits above them in the food chain. The ringed seal is their principal quarry, and they take one by holding themselves motionless above a breathing hole cut into the sea ice, occasionally for hours at a stretch before erupting into a strike. When seals become scarce, though, a polar bear will consume more or less anything it comes across. And that willingness, unfortunately, extends to us. The characteristic that separates this species from every other bear is straightforward. This is the single bear that will deliberately stalk a human being with the intention of eating them. Grizzlies and black bears certainly attack people, but those incidents are nearly always defensive, prompted by a startled encounter, by cubs needing protection, or by a carcass being guarded. Polar bears operate on a different basis entirely. When a polar bear moves toward a settlement or a camp, hunger is frequently the reason, and it has already assessed the people there as something worth eating. Researchers have recorded this predatory pattern again and again throughout the Arctic, and it makes meeting one fundamentally more dangerous than meeting any other bear. Faced with a charging grizzly, playing dead can occasionally persuade the animal that you no longer represent a threat, and it walks away. Faced with a polar bear that is hunting you, playing dead just saves it some effort. Fortunately, deaths from polar bear attacks remain rare, and that comes down largely to how few people actually inhabit the remote Arctic country where these animals live. When attacks do occur, however, they frequently end in death, and their predatory character makes them uniquely disturbing. Back in 2011, a polar bear walked into a camp full of young people on expedition in Svalbard, in Norway, killing one of them and injuring 4 more before it was shot. The animal had spent some time observing the campsite beforehand, and everything about its approach fit a predatory pattern rather than a defensive one. Across the Canadian territory of Nunavut, indigenous communities have shared this landscape with these animals across thousands of years, and there the danger is understood at a cultural level. People there know you never leave food outdoors, you never walk toward a polar bear, and you never assume that a bear heading in your direction is merely curious. Climate change keeps making all of this worse. With Arctic sea ice steadily retreating, polar bears now spend longer periods on land, cut off from the seals they would rather be eating. Hungry animals turn up in settlements looking for something to eat, and encounters between bears and people have grown more frequent over recent decades. In the Russian settlement of Belushya Guba, sitting out on the archipelago of Novaya Zemlya, dozens of these animals overran the place during 2019, going through rubbish, walking into apartment blocks, and thoroughly frightening the residents. Nobody died in that instance, but it demonstrated a trend that seems certain to continue as the planet warms. The polar bear claims 5th place. And for our next entry, we move into the tropics, Southeast Asia, and the Australian North. No reptile alive today grows larger than the saltwater crocodile, which passes 6 meters in length and tips beyond a metric ton. It also belongs to a very small group of animals that will hunt a human deliberately, actively, whenever the chance appears. Several predators on this list only turn to people under particular conditions. The saltwater crocodile requires no such trigger. From the perspective of a large salty, somebody wading a river or walking its bank is nothing more than another animal of a convenient size to eat. No desperation factors into the decision. No injury has forced any change of diet on the animal. We are simply food, and that is the whole of the explanation. Their range is genuinely enormous, reaching from eastern India across the whole of Southeast Asia into northern Australia and out through the islands of the western Pacific, and everywhere in that range they take hundreds of lives a year. Pinning down an exact figure is difficult, since a great many attacks happen in remote places and never get reported. But the estimates suggest saltwater crocodiles account for somewhere in the range of 300 to 1,000 deaths yearly. Out on Indonesia's Bangka Island, tin mining has wrecked a great deal of crocodile habitat, driving the animals into flooded mine pits where they ambush the workers. Since 2016, roughly 40 people have died in crocodile attacks on that island by itself. Attacks are a routine occurrence in the Solomon Islands, in East Timor, and in Papua New Guinea, and there are communities in those places living in permanent fear of open water. Australia sees fewer deaths thanks to relentless public education, warning signage, and firm rules about where people may swim. They still happen all the same. Among the most notorious was the 1985 death of a model named Ginger Meadows, taken by a saltwater crocodile while she stood in shallow water in the remote north of Western Australia. Locals had warned her about exactly this. She went into the water regardless, and she was seized almost immediately. That attack demonstrated exactly how quick and how efficient these animals are, and it drove home the message that across northern Australia, no stretch of water can ever be treated as safe. What makes them such effective hunters of people is the ambush itself. They hold position at the water's edge, hidden below the surface with nothing showing but eyes and nostrils, waiting for something to move within range. They can hold that position for hours without shifting, and their dark, rough hide leaves them practically indistinguishable from a sunken log or a smear of mud. When the strike arrives, it is explosive and very nearly unsurvivable. They surge forward at a speed that looks impossible for an animal that size, seize the victim in jaws, producing bite force, measured in tons, then take them beneath the surface in the space of a heartbeat. Once a big saltwater crocodile has you in the water, the ending is almost always the same, because between the death roll and raw strength, getting free is essentially impossible. Their patience is remarkable too. Documented cases exist of saltwater crocodiles studying the habits of people who visit the same riverbank on a schedule, then stationing themselves precisely there and waiting. That degree of predatory calculation puts them among the most dangerous animals a person can meet, and it explains why the guidance in northern Australia is so blunt. If there's water in front of you and no sign declaring it safe, work on the assumption that something is in it. The saltwater crocodile claims 4th place, and for our next entry we cross to the riverbanks and savannas below the Sahara. Only one big cat forms large social groups, and that arrangement has turned the lion into one of the most effective hunters anywhere on the African continent. The same arrangement has equally made it among the most dangerous animals to people across all of history, because once a pride learns to hunt humans, it can lay waste to a whole region. Lions today are broadly cautious around us, and in most of Africa they keep well away from villages and settlements. Across history, though, and in certain places even now, particular animals and particular prides have acquired a taste for human flesh. The man-eating episodes that followed rank among the most retold predator stories anywhere. The best known of them all belongs to the Tsavo man-eaters, a pair of manless males that brought terror to a railway construction site in Kenya during 1898. Across roughly 9 months, those 2 lions killed and ate an estimated 35 workers, and some accounts place the figure a good deal higher. work on the Kenya-Uganda railway ground to a total halt as the laborers, thoroughly terrified, refused to carry on until something was done about the animals. The lions appeared to select the workers' camps with deliberate calculation, hauling men from their tents after dark and carrying them away into the night. Thorn barriers went up around the camps, and bonfires were kept burning through the night, and none of it made any difference. The attacks continued with a cunning and a persistence that nobody involved could account for. Colonel John Henry Patterson, the chief engineer on the project, finally shot both animals after months of failure, and their mounted bodies remain on show to this day inside Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. Tsavo was far from the only such episode. Lion attacks remain a serious problem in Tanzania, where lions took an estimated 200 to 300 lives nationwide between 1990 and 2005 alone. One particularly notorious animal, remembered now as Mfuwe's man-eater, took 6 lives in Zambia during 1991 before a safari guide from California shot it. What unsettled people most was its conduct after one of those kills. Witnesses saw it walk through the village with a laundry bag of clothing belonging to one of its victims held in its jaws, as though parading a trophy down the street. That one detail has kept the Mfuwe man-eater among the most discussed individual predators in recent African history, and that animal now stands beside the Tsavo pair in the same Chicago museum. Then there is the Njombe region of Tanzania, where a pride is thought to have killed some 1,500 people over the years from 1932 to 1947, a toll that would rank as the worst lion man-eating episode ever put on record. Some historians dispute that total, arguing the genuine number was probably inflated by reporting from the colonial period. Even at a substantially lower count, it would still stand among the most devastating predator events in human history. Whatever pushes a lion toward man-eating tends to mirror what pushes a leopard: injury, or some condition robbing the animal of its ability to take normal prey. Broken teeth, embedded porcupine quills, illness draining its strength, any of these can steer a lion toward easier targets. And in rural Africa, few targets come easier than people. The lion claims third place, and for our next entry we stay in Africa, moving to the rivers and the lakes. Only its saltwater relative grows bigger than the Nile crocodile, and nothing below the Sahara takes more human lives. These reptiles reach beyond 6 milliliters and beyond a metric ton, and they occupy practically every significant river, lake, and wetland on the continent. Throughout rural Africa, people have no alternative but to use those same rivers and lakes as their source of drinking water, for bathing, for laundry, and for fishing, which puts them in daily contact with Nile crocodiles. The result comes to an estimated 300 to 500 deaths each year, and the genuine number is almost certainly higher, since a great many attacks in remote areas never get reported or recorded at all. You cannot discuss this species without mentioning Gustave, an enormous individual who grew into perhaps the most notorious man-eating animal of the modern era. The French herpetologist Patrice Fay first identified him during the late 1990s around Burundi's Ruzizi River and the waters of Lake Tanganyika. Rumor credited him with as many as 300 deaths, though a more grounded estimate lands nearer 60. Even at 60, he would still rank with the deadliest individual predators any species has produced. Gustave was reckoned to exceed 6 millimeters, and carried scars across his body, bullet marks among them, plus a dark patch on his skull that may have come from a failed military effort to kill him. Mission after mission was mounted to capture or destroy him, and he evaded every last one, sliding away into deep water each time. Whether he remains alive today is something nobody can answer, but his standing as the most feared crocodile in all of Africa has comfortably outlasted the question. Their effectiveness against people comes from the same ambush approach their saltwater cousins rely on. They wait below the surface near the places people habitually reach the water, then strike with speed and force, enough to leave a victim virtually no chance. Once someone is in their grip, the crocodile drags them under and executes a death roll, rotating its whole body to disorient them and stop any resistance. Even the extremely rare individuals who break the initial hold are often pulled back under before reaching the bank. In some riverside communities across Africa, the fear runs so deep that it structures ordinary life. Elaborate routines develop for reaching water safely, with certain villages posting lookouts while others fill their containers, and children learn from a very early age never to go near the edge on their own. Women fetching water and washing clothes rank among the most frequent victims, alongside fishermen wading into the shallows to set and check nets. In certain regions, these attacks are so routine that local news barely covers them, and families who lose someone frequently treat it as an unavoidable condition of life instead of an event worth reporting. A recent case did reach international headlines out of South Africa, involving a man who disregarded warning signs and started fishing in an area known to hold crocodiles. Incidents like that reveal a pattern that holds right across the continent. Those most exposed are the people with no alternative but to wade into crocodile-infested water simply to survive, and those who dismiss the danger despite being warned plainly. For all of that, Nile crocodiles are a vital component of African freshwater ecosystems, and managing conflict between them and people has become a significant strand of conservation work continent-wide. Yet, for the millions of Africans whose survival depends on rivers and lakes, these animals remain a permanent and unavoidable threat. The Nile crocodile claims second place. And, for the final entry, we return to the Indian subcontinent and to Southeast Asia, where the deadliest man-eating cat of them all is waiting. Nothing among the big cats grows larger than a tiger, certain males pushing beyond 300 kilos, and no wild cat species anywhere has killed more people across recorded history. Estimates put the number of deaths caused by tigers in India alone at approximately 373,000 between 1800 and 2009, a figure that resists comprehension. Through the British colonial period there, attacks on people were frequent enough that the administration kept professional hunters on retainer to track down and kill man-eating individuals. Several among those hunters ended up legendary figures themselves. Jim Corbett, mentioned earlier, was called out repeatedly by desperate villagers facing tigers that had begun terrorizing their communities. His written accounts of following these animals through dense forest rank among the most gripping adventure writing anyone has produced. History's single deadliest man-eater was the Champawat tigress, a Bengal animal reckoned to have taken 436 lives, first in Nepal and afterwards through the Kumaon district of northern India, somewhere between the closing years of the 1800s and the opening years of the 1900s. Corbett brought her down at last in 1907, and on examining the carcass, he found both upper canines broken, most probably by a gunshot wound she had taken previously. That damage had left her unable to take the deer and wild boar she would normally hunt, so she turned to the one animal slow enough and available enough for her to catch: us. The Champawat story is horrifying and tragic in equal measure, because the tiger responsible for 436 deaths was made by a human being who shot and wounded her years before any of it started. Tiger attacks still happen today, though the numbers sit far below the historical figures, mostly because so few tigers remain. Roughly 4,500 wild tigers survive across their entire range, a fraction of what once moved through Asia. In specific places, though, the problem persists and remains severe. The Sundarbans, an immense mangrove forest straddling the Indian and Bangladeshi border, is the single most dangerous place on Earth for tiger attacks. Roughly a third of every attack on a human happens there, and the tigers of that forest have earned a reputation for unusual boldness and aggression. The people most exposed are the fishermen and the honey collectors who go into those mangroves to make a living. And despite an assortment of deterrent measures, attacks keep taking dozens of lives every year. One deterrent had people wearing face masks fixed to the back of the skull, built around the idea that a tiger prefers ambushing from behind and will hold off if it believes something is watching. It worked for a short while, and then the tigers apparently saw through the deception and went back to attacking regardless. Electrified dummies shaped like people have been positioned out among the trees as well, delivering a sharp shock to any tiger that bites or claws at them. And these have had some success in teaching individual animals to associate people with something unpleasant. But across a mangrove forest covering more than 10,000 square kilometers, there is only so much such measures can achieve. What distinguishes the Sundarbans tigers is that they appear to hunt people not merely when out of options, but as a standing part of their diet. Exactly why that should be is still contested among researchers. Some researchers point at the brackish water in those mangroves as a driver of increased aggression, while others argue that the sheer volume of human activity there has simply taught these tigers that people constitute reliable food. Everywhere else in India the pattern differs. Most man-eating cases involve animals that are elderly, injured, or driven out of their territory by younger competitors. Unable to take their usual prey with any reliability, they turn to us out of necessity rather than preference. India's government and various wildlife organizations have built protocols around man-eating tigers, typically starting with an attempt at capture and moving to lethal force only when capture fails. Those calls are invariably contentious because every tiger represents a meaningful share of a very small wild population, and destroying one can feel like weighing human lives directly against a species already standing at the brink of extinction. During 2018, the operation to track down and shoot a man-eating tigress called Avni in Maharashtra set off a national argument across India about how these cases ought to be handled, with animal rights campaigners condemning the outcome and local communities insisting it was necessary to keep them alive. There is no comfortable resolution to that dilemma, and it will only arise more often as human populations keep pushing into tiger country. A long and devastating record of killing people, combined with attacks that continue in the Sundarbans and elsewhere across its range, puts the tiger comfortably in first place. No other big cat has taken as many human lives across history, and arguably nothing else on land has either. That they carry on doing so today, with their numbers as depleted as they are, says everything about how formidable these animals genuinely remain. There are, of course, several other predators that might have earned a place here, and I have no doubt a few of you will rank things differently. If you have thoughts or suggestions of your own, feel free to drop them below. For now, though, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you again next time.